Hi, I'm Sasha. I'll be leading the Tellor deep dive this week because we're going to be interviewing the Tellor CEO, Nick Fett.
I'm actually the CTO, so
CTO. Did I say CEO?
I think you did, but it's
Oh, okay. The Tellor CTO. So me and Nick actually know each other because we met and spoke a lot at the recent Oracle conference. And full disclosure, I do own some Tellor tributes just because I researched the project right before the Oracle conference and I really liked it. So I feel like I need to give that little disclosure.
Yeah, I wanted to find somebody that could be like who actually knows enough about oracles to pick all the pain points that you can potentially find in Teller, and then who was also like not part of the Teller team, but then also like would respond to my emails and be on the call with me. So
yeah. Oh, and also I was one of the co-founders of API3, another Oracle project in the space. So I'm pretty familiar with the Oracle space.
Yeah, they were on like a month ago. So for viewers,
Yeah.
you can go watch that interview.
Yeah. Okay, so Nick, now it's your turn to introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I think people watching this, most of them probably know who I am, but I'm Nick, one of the founders of Teller. Yeah, I guess so that as far as like where I'll deep dive on the story of Teller. I guess I can give the quick background for people that don't know it. I've been in blockchain and Bitcoin for a long time, and I was working at the CFTC from 2015 to 2017. And I was part of the blockchain.
And for those that don't know, what is the CFTC?
Yeah, that's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. That's a regulator here in the US. So we would regulate derivatives, commodities, and one commodity is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And so I got a.
Oh, sorry, I'm terrible at this.
No, doing good. I
I
think.
was just gonna say, you used to work for the man.
Yeah, well, it was funny because like I got into crypto because I was a volunteer on the Ron Paul campaign. You remember that? And
I was pro Ron Paul back 2008.
This was the 2012 campaign, but
Oh, okay.
The 2008 campaign I was just a fan, but then I started volunteering in the 2011 one, and then and that's how I actually heard about Bitcoin and got a little bit into it. But then I was like very big into Austrian economics, and then like any good economics major who graduated in 2010, I couldn't find a job, so my hatred of the man went about as far as not being able to find a job. So then I went and I got a job at the U.S. government. I started out in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so I was doing employment numbers and stuff like that. And that's actually how I met my co-founder, though. So it all worked out. She was also from the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the time, like 11 years ago now. So
yeah, I like another reason why I like you guys is you guys are like actual kind of OG. I mean, everyone argues about what's an OG, but in terms of like mentality and when you started and the whole still being interested in Austrian economics and stuff like that, like you don't see that much outside of the Bitcoin space.
Yeah,
because you guys are strictly like, multi-chain, blah blah blah. You guys aren't Bitcoiners, but you still have that kind of mentality, which I like.
It's super funny. I mean, even like my co-founders and stuff, they got in like the 2016 era, and like when we were started out, like they didn't feel like OGs at all, because it was they were only in it for a year or two, and now it's like you've been in for 6 years. You're like, you've been full time for 5 years now, so it's like you are an OG now, so it's okay. But anyway, yeah, I was working at the CFTC, and part of my job was I got to like experiment with some, looking at these smart contract platforms, and we would listen to all the banks come and tell us about putting derivatives and settlement on a blockchain, and it was all blockchain, not Bitcoin and stuff. And I wrote some code while I was there to put derivatives on top of a smart contract on Ethereum. And then I was like, this is way better. And I was like, why don't I just leave and do this?
And so, what kind of derivatives, like your initial code, what kind of derivatives were you writing?
These were like long and short tokens. So you wanted to like just bet on the price of Bitcoin. And so you you would mint a bunch of long tokens and short tokens. And, you know, I was kind of inspired a little bit by Augur. And yeah, there wasn't a whole lot. Like back then, I mean, I forget what derivatives protocol were even around. Like it was, there really weren't many at the time. It was like prediction markets is the way to bet on prices. And so yeah, it was a decent idea. And then I got an Ethereum Foundation grant because I was planning on putting this all on a side chain. So I was going to have like a side chain and you would check points to Ethereum. And long story short, it was like really, really hard to do and like very insecure, which is like something they're still working on. But yeah, like I didn't like, and then the big problem too that we ran into, this was 2017, and you couldn't find any oracles in the space. There were none. It was like Oracleize, which was a centralized, you know, a guy in London. So you just had to, yeah, there was nothing you could do. So we decided to write our own oracle, which soon became Tellor. And then in late 2018, we pivoted and became Tellor to start the oracle process.
So just out of curiosity, what were the Oracle discussions at the time? Like, were people aware that this was going to be like a big and central kind of
No, I mean, so there was like,
system?
yeah, like, I mean, you had, there was like Oracleize, who was like, he was fine running it, like you would pay him a quarter and he would go fetch the API result for you. But then as far as decentralized ones, it was like, people thought it would have to be something like Augur. So like you would have to have some very slow prediction market system. So it would be like this optimistic, you would use some sort of optimistic system, and then you would fall back to using an Augur like prediction market. And that was just how it would have to be. And then, you know, or you would have like, you know, if it was going to be price feeds, you would want to just do like, you would want on-chain exchanges. So you would want to have like, say, you know, auctions or something like that to generate the price. That was like, if you remember like Gnosis's early oracles, they would do a prediction market on the price of ETH, and then they would auction off ETH at the end. And that would be like, that was the price of ETH. Of course, you knew it was like able to be manipulated, but it was like, that was just how you had to do it. And so, yeah, we said like, no, there can probably be some other ways to attack the problem. And some guys, I mean, even back then there was Chainlink had their original white paper, but and they were pitching us to use them, but we were like, you guys are still super centralized, like, you know, nothing in your white paper is live. And they were like, oh, well, we will be soon, so you should use us. And I mean, this was before even their price feeds were up. And then Witnet, surprisingly, Witnet was also around back then. Yeah, I mean, they've been around forever. So
was it you, Witnet, and Chainlink around the time you guys launched, or at least like wrote the white paper? Wow,
that was like the ones that we thought. There were probably some other ones, but those are the people kind of going after the Oracle space at the moment. And then
right. And the next kind of big origin question: did you guys get funding, or how did you guys fund yourselves?
So we got in. I got an Ethereum Foundation grant for the derivatives company, and then we ran out of money like 3 or 4 times. Yeah, like we just couldn't raise money for that. And then, I mean, but it was like, you know, 2018 was not a good period for raising money. And neither was 2019, because we also couldn't raise money for Tellor. But we talked to all the VCs, and we actually, the only one we got into was, so we got into Binance Labs. So they were like the incubator project, and they were super helpful. This was in March of 2019. We did like an 8-week-long Binance Labs course, and they gave us like $250,000. So we took and yeah, and then we tried to raise, but like we had in our minds, like from the get-go, this was like our old school Bitcoin mentality. We're like, we can't do a pre-mine. Like nobody's ever going to invest in a coin with a pre-mine. You know, let's not be shitty and do a pre-mine. So we're like, no pre-mine. And then we were also like, we had this thing like, we're not doing like an ICO where we pay some exchange 30% of our token to do an ICO. So we're like, no pre-mine, no ICO. And basically all the VCs at the time were like, yeah, that's not going to work then.
I'd actually be interested in how many people that are new to crypto now even know what pre-mine means.
I mean, you see the Bitcoin maximalists talking about it. I think.
Well, of course, but I mean, like, it was such a controversial thing a couple of years ago, but now I don't hear anyone talking about it. at
Well, it
least
was
in
this,
my experience.
yeah, well, I mean, the idea generally, you know, we wanted to be decentralized from the get-go, and if you didn't, if you had a pre-mine, by definition, like the holders of your token are going to be centralized at the beginning. And so how do you have this fair, equitable distribution of tokens so that way, whenever you, because you have a token that theoretically does something in your system, so if the distribution is centralized, then likely your system is too. So you need to make sure that it's a distributed set of token holders, and how do you do that in a fair way? And the question's always like, well, obviously not printing a whole bunch at the beginning and giving 90% to the team, because it can get decentralized. Like, I mean, we've seen with even Ethereum, like over time it does distribute, but at the beginning it's definitely not decentralized. It's very, very centralized at the beginning. So yeah,
so your token was literally just mined by oracles.
Yeah, we started, I mean, so we started in August of 2019, and people started reporting prices, and like so back then you had a staking requirement of 1,000 tokens, and it was like just me, like I had a CPU running, and you couldn't get people to do it, because to submit token prices to get rewards, you needed to stake, but you also needed to pay some gas on Ethereum. Granted, gas was almost like, it was like a quarter per submission, it was nothing, but like you couldn't find people who would pay a quarter to get your token. Like, I remember I would like literally give people thousands of tokens back then, just be like, please go, because this was before yield farming or anything, so you would just be like, go run this system, like, and like, yeah. I promise if you're spending $20 a month, like you can have thousands of Tellor tokens. And yeah, but it was cool though, you know, like a lot of the early supporters who got on ended up doing really, really well, obviously, because they were holding thousands of tokens.
Yeah. Shall we get into like Tellor technologically? Sure. So do you want to do like I have the white paper here, but do you want to do the user journey part, or do we want to kind of go through element of the white paper?
That's up to you.
Okay, let's do a user journey first, like just high level. If I want prices, or if I want, should we do something more interesting than prices?
It works the same way for our system.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever is easier for you to say.
Okay. I want BTC price as a smart contract developer. What do I do?
So we'll draw. So this is our smart contract, and then so we'll start over here with kind of setting up the system. So the way that the system works is there are staked reporters. So what they're going to do is each person will deposit some tokens into our smart contract. So this is what's known as your stake. Right now, this is 100 tokens, but we're doing our final upgrade here in 1 month, T-minus 1 month, and we're doing a few upgrades. So I'm going to probably just describe that system, but it's like almost identical. There's a few differences, but you stake about $2,000 worth of tokens. So it's not like one of these crazy stake multi-millions.
So if I want to use the system, I have to stake.
No. So if you want to use the system, so we'll go over here to the users. Okay. This can be Sasha. She'll be our user. She would tip. What you do is you tip the smart contract. So we have a contract that you would send a tip to say you would have to add in the query ID. So the query ID is like it's a bytes 32 string, but it's the hash of going to be spot price BTC USD, the query ID, and then an amount. So like a tip, you would say like to get the Bitcoin price. I don't know like what gas is. So basically, you're sending some money in, and whoever submits the Bitcoin price next gets that money. So basically, you have to give them a little bit of money plus however much it costs in gas.
Yeah. So is there some way for me to see like a dashboard or something for me to know what a competitive tip is? Like, how do I even know what a competitive tip is? Gas price,
literally. Because
so it's usually so tip is proportional to gas price.
100%. Because yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is like because we're not limited, at least yet, on the number of reporters. It's all based upon like if you give them a $10 tip plus whatever it's going to cost them to submit, our reporters are using MEV to compete with each other, and they will tip you. They will get it ASAP. So you don't have to worry about it sort of waiting.
So just literally, so in the most basic level, under like non-anomalous circumstances, as long as the tip is higher than the gas price, they're making a net positive.
Yeah, exactly. And that's too, you know, however fast you want it. Like you could do like a low amount that's like right at the gas price, and you might have to wait for a certain reporter who's willing to bet on it. But most of the time, yeah, you would just tip like, so sometimes the profit threshold's like usually it's like a quarter, 50 cents on mainnet. And yeah, and then you can do that. So
yeah, sorry, I'm getting kind of like autistically obsessed with this, but is there a way, do you guys know, like, have you guys plotted like historical tip prices and like approximately what's the multiplier on gas?
yeah, so we have this other thing called, which, you know, now we're like doing loops, but we have the way that the Tellor smart contract system actually, how do we like, our token supply grows over time. And the way that our token supply grows over time is we have what are called time-based rewards. This is what mints to the smart contract function. So it goes into the smart contract function. The way that we like to look at it is like an hourglass function. So like there's like tokens, and then it drips down, and it drips at a rate of half of a TRB every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, there's half of a TRB for whoever submits any price. So anything.
And this is, sorry, I saw this in the white paper, and I was going to ask a question. Is this going all the time? But you said something about it being like reset or something, or this is literally going all the time.
It's going all the time. This is what keeps the Tellor system live.
Oh, so this ensures liveness, or this is an incentive to ensure liveness.
Yeah, so and it subsidizes the queries for people. So like if you give a tip, you can be under the gas price most times, because now like we'll just be using the time-based rewards as well.
And are these inflationary rewards?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's something like, forget what we have in our system. It's like 5% inflation or something on a yearly basis. But yeah, it's just these things are minting as well to keep the system alive. But anyway, back to you. So you would put on, you put in, say like I'll tip, if the current gas price is $5, you're going to tip $5.25 worth of TRB, and send it to the contract. And then all these guys who are, they're staked reporters, they each have $2,000 or whatever staked. They're going to race, they're going to see that, and then they're going to go and they're going to throw in the BTC price. It's just going to say the query ID and then the price. And they're all going to compete. It's a race. So first one to do it gets it. And that's it. So that's kind of how the system works the vast majority of times. It's just, this is it. But sort of the fun part about how this is actually in Oracle and how this whole system works is everybody can see this. So everybody looks at this Bitcoin price, and you know, we can come over here and we'll draw. So in goes the big BTC price. And then people can check, is it a good price? So good price. Yes. You would just use it. So you can use it, but then no would come over to a dispute. So anybody, so you're probably monitoring it, you would say like, is it actually a good price? Usually it's these guys. So it's the other reporters are all competing against each other. So they're almost always the ones who dispute each other. And a lot of, actually probably half the time, the guy who submitted the bad Bitcoin price did an accident and he'll just dispute himself. But it goes to his dispute. So you pay 1/10 for the first dispute of the stake amount, so like $200, and it goes to a dispute. And then that would be a 2-day long vote. 2-day long vote. And then at the end of the 2-day long vote, it's either so is it a bad price? If yes, if it is a bad price, then the person disputer gets the stake and its dispute fee back. But if it's not a bad price, then the reporter gets the dispute fee. So he gets paid the fee for his time, because he wasn't allowed to mine for those 2 days. So it's like a sorry for your inconvenience. Okay. I'll let you ask questions.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot, like I understand like the high level, it makes sense, and it's like,
yeah, please dig in.
And if anyone's familiar with like arbitration systems in blockchain, it's like it's pretty familiar. So I guess, so historically, are there examples of disputes, and like how often do they occur?
I think we've had like 80 or 90 in the system so far. Almost always they're like accidents. Like almost always it's like Joe's reporting software that he wrote broke, or some API went down and he submitted a whole bunch of prices that were bad. So he got disputed and slashed. And then it's like sort of sad, because then like, you know, he's like complaining in the Discord, like, guys, you're gonna make my family starve. You know, please don't slash me. And we're like, you submitted bad prices. Like,
so I guess now my question is, have there been any false negatives? So bad data that weren't reported.
That's gotten through?
Yeah.
Not that we know of. So we have had some issues where it's debatable. Because that goes into, as you know, like the Bitcoin price, like sometimes, so like let's say the current Bitcoin price is 20,000. If somebody submits 20,500, is that a dispute?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And
you're touching on, oh sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, usually the way that we do that is we just monitor it, because usually like what'll happen is, like, we were having this issue with whenever we were submitting for Ampleforth a lot. They wanted it really, really tight within a range. And we had some reporters who were reporting a much wider range based on, you know, probably just scraping it differently. And we would just tell them in the Discord, like, hey guys, like, be sure to monitor it, make sure you're running, you know, the most up-to-date software, or else you're going to get slashed. And most of them would, but it was just like sort of more of like a friendly thing. Like, we're all trying to get the best prices on chain for a user, not like the road. So.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of example I was wondering about, because I feel like that's like the kind of critical question when it comes to oracles, and especially oracles that are reporting like non-binary data or like non-discrete data. When you're dealing with like continuous data in a system that's as slow and laggy as blockchain. Like, I remember reading the initial Chainlink white paper, where they basically their whole security mechanism, like in summary, was slashing outliers. But it's like, how do you program outliers on the blockchain? Like, I mean, for anyone that's kind of familiar with statistics knows that's like pretty much an impossible problem because of all these nuances. Like, if someone reports slightly late and they're, you know, 0.1% off versus 0.2% off, like, how do you make these kind of distinctions? And it feels like a problem that needs a bit of subjectivity.
Yeah, no, it completely needs subjectivity, because I mean, like, with the Bitcoin price, like, you could always hard code in like, well, if it's off by 50%, but sometimes 50% changes happen really, really fast.
Yeah.
In prices. And then also like, and then there's also like a gas thing. So like, what happens if you request a Bitcoin price, somebody puts it on, or somebody submits the transaction, and then the Bitcoin price falls, but your transaction had low gas, so it goes through 10 minutes later.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's wrong. Like, is it a wrong price?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I've come to the conclusion that you can't build an Oracle system without a dispute, some sort of like eventual
Yep.
dispute mechanism. And all Oracle projects are moving in this direction. Like this is one thing I talked about during like the Oracle conference, but Chainlink 2.0 mentions, like they have sort of a complicated different system, but they essentially have some dispute mechanism. And pretty much as far as I know, all like modern
Yeah.
all like legitimate Oracle projects have this, because I think everyone's kind of come to the same conclusion that you're dealing with data. There's going to be a point where there's a bit of subjectivity, and that's kind of when you need human input.
Yeah. So no, I mean, we sort of realized that it's also where you kind of need a token, and like, how do you get a group of people to be subjective about something, and that's still a really, really hard problem.
So you're saying your system hasn't really come down to like a real hard, legitimate dispute about the data that was inputted into the system?
No, I mean, one of the hardest ones, probably one of the harder ones we had, was like somebody requested an API from Binance, and it was like, I forget what price it was. It was like 0x BTC or something. And they were requesting, okay, what does the Binance say on this? And then the Binance API froze. So yeah, so Binance discontinued it, but they didn't discontinue it like a 404 error. They just had it return the same price infinitely. So then the problem with that was, now the 0x Bitcoin price was actually changing, but the API wasn't reflecting it. So we had, it was like a split vote, and I think we ended up just giving people their money back. Because so we can, in our system, what you can do, there's actually 3 results. You can have yes, no, or invalid.
I saw that, yeah.
So like you can have an invalid system, and that was like one of the bigger sort of debates in the system, because like, was it wrong or was it not? And we ended up just giving everybody their money back, and that's what invalid does. Like, the reporter gets his money back, the disputer gets his money back. Thanks for making the system better, guys.
So did you come up with the invalid option after that event?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Well, it was like, Augur for a long time has had the invalid option as well. And it's something that we wanted, because there's theoretically a lot of times that you don't, it's not that, because in a system, you only want to punish reporters when they're bad, or else you don't really have a good system, because people won't report. You want a way to remove bad values, but you only want to punish the reporter if they're actually being malicious. And it does take subjectivity, but usually, in most cases, it's really, really hard. It's really, really easy to tell if they're being malicious versus not being malicious. And most of the time, it's like, the API said it was this, and you can just remove it. So
okay, so back to, I keep going off track, but it's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to me not being interested at all. Okay, so in terms of the dispute mechanism, so again, it makes sense high level. So in terms of details, damn it, what was I gonna say? Okay, so in terms of like fees and stuff like that, like I know like things can get disputed multiple times, and there's a way to make it less appealing to keep disputing.
Yeah, so this is the one way, probably that's actually the cheapest way. If somebody wanted to come on and censor Tellor, how would you do that? And the cheapest way is actually to just dispute every single value that comes through. So reporters would start doing it, and you just dispute it, where all the good values are just throwing them off chain, because then you don't have a value. So what happens is the dispute is originally 1/10 of the stake amount, but after it doubles to 2, then it doubles to 4, then to 8, and then very quickly it is just equal to the stake amount. So the dispute fee will equal the stake amount. We don't want it to go much over the stake amount, because then it could theoretically just become too costly for people to actually dispute. but it just sits at the stake amount. And then the cost to dispute is equal to the stake amount after that. So then the cost to like censor is basically however fast people are submitting times the stake amount. But that's actually just disputing here. These disputes also, for each dispute, you can have multiple rounds as well. So this is something, you know, like Augur or Claros has as well. So like if we had this dispute that went to a 2-day long vote and it settled one way and you still disagree, you can actually, you double the dispute fee and you pay and it starts a new round. And this one just keeps going.
I think Claros uses the exact same system. It's like 2x each time.
Yeah, they do. So I think so. I can tell you where we differ from Claros and some other Oracle systems. So on Claros, the main way we differ there is Claros has a max limit to the number of rounds. We do not.
Oh, okay.
I feel like I never got.
Oh, so you're saying you can keep disputing at the max dispute fee amount.
No, so these disputes actually just the fee just keeps doubling. But yeah, you can. There's no like end round. You know, like in Claros, like I forget what amount it is, but you actually have like, okay, this is the final dispute. Everybody better vote because it's finalized after that.
Oh, okay. I guess what I'm asking is like, there's only so many times you can double the fee or whatever before you reach the max amount. So like you're saying, like you can have continuous disputes at the same amount, at the same max amount.
You can dispute new values at the same max amount. These other ones would theoretically get really high.
Okay, I see.
You could theoretically hit like the total token supply or something like that, but you probably wouldn't do that. But there's actually the really interesting way that we would differ from Claros or from UMA as well is you actually don't care. Like you as Sasha probably don't care about this result. And the reason is so if these reporters put on the Bitcoin price, so like we'll just show like the blockchain. So this is like a Bitcoin price, and then it goes here, but it gets disputed. Some new person will just come in and put it on chain. So they'll put a new Bitcoin price on chain, one that they think is valid. And you would just use this one. You're not going to wait 2 days for this dispute or even longer, multiple disputes. You're just going to use the next one.
Yeah.
And same way, if this one gets disputed, another one will come on. And so you can, they can all go off to dispute land and you just care about getting your price ASAP. And this is different than like, you know, UMA has like, if it goes to a dispute, you have to wait for it. Same with Claros, the whole system of Claros is just built, it's basically just the dispute process.
Yeah, to be fair to them, they're explicit about being like Claros is not an oracle, and then UMA is like explicit about being like a slow oracle, like
For sure.
a slow oracle. But no, that's great. And another question is, so this is something I actually read the newest version of your white paper before this, but I read it really quickly and I actually wasn't sure who actually does the voting. Like, are there people that stake somewhere, or is it literally anyone with TRB that can vote?
So yeah, so right now we have in our system, it's a four-part system. So it's 25% the token holders, 25% the users.
You're writing a bit off screen, by the way.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Good. So token holders, users. So the user, 25% reporters. And then right now we have 25% team. But eventually we'll throw that one away or something with it. But the way it works is, so the token holders, the users, they're all equal. So equal weighting amongst these four groups. The users is every time you do a tip, you get added a point in the voting.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, how are these registered in terms of smart contracts?
Yeah,
Like
so
how,
the users is it just keeps track of, hey, she tipped $5, she gets $5 worth of tipping power or vote.
oh, okay.
And
So
then
that's like historically, if I ever tipped
ever,
a user, okay.
yep. So it adds up over time. And then same with reporters. Every time you do a report, you get one, you get incremented one report, and then historically, how many times that people voted, that's your vote weight.
Okay.
And that's, and the reason is so like we wanted, you have this problem in a lot of Oracle systems or in voting systems where if it's like just the token holders, which is what you have, it's hard to get the token holders to vote in general, but they might always want to say that no, we didn't do anything wrong, it was the user that did something wrong, or like it was the API that went down, that there is no dispute, the reporter gets their money back, especially if you have a system with only a few big reporters who you don't want to piss off. The token holders might always just vote on their behalf. So we wanted a little bit of balance of powers. So like the users you could expect would always vote in favor of likely the integrity of the price feed in and of itself, whereas the reporters might have some more self-interest in there. In regards to just, we care more about the reporter subset, and then we have the team as well. So yeah, we're trying to like balance all the different priorities in the system to make it work.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, I feel like all of these pure voting systems are going to move to something a bit more representational. Because I mean, that's what we've seen off chain happen with governments.
Yeah, and we see very
not
little.
to get political, but
No, it's good. Yeah, I mean, we've seen too, like a lot of times, most of the time is in our system, very few people vote, just because we want a system where very few people have to vote. Like if it comes down to a dispute, like we have infinite rounds, but on the first rounds, usually it's just like us as the team that votes, and then everybody else looks at it and they're like, yeah, we agree with that. We're not going to waste our gas and go vote. And it just sort of stays there, and it pays out fine. So
also, as a token holder, is there any way that I can be notified that a dispute has occurred, or is it just something I have to keep up to date with, like in the Discord and stuff?
Usually up to date. I mean, we have monitors you can run yourself. Like if you wanted,
Okay.
if you wanted to download software and run it, you can. But yeah, that's about it. So.
Yeah, because like I'm a token holder, but like I have no idea. Just a comment, like I know Claros has, of course, this is like a centralized front end, but sometimes you need such things. They have a thing where like you put in your email address and you get notified if you ever have to vote. So
yeah, we could do something like that. I think.
I mean, I would have no clue that I have to vote for Claros unless I got those emails, because I mean I don't have the time to pay attention. So just like a thought.
Yeah, we could. It would be a good. Get all the emails of our token holders too.
Yeah.
Dox them all.
Yeah. What else did because I have some like high level questions, but I want to see if there's any like specific details. So another thing, like your white paper spends a lot of time talking about like monetary policy. So I'm guessing it's something that's like kind of evolved over time.
Yeah, so I mean, this was actually a big change that we've had. So I kind of alluded to it at the beginning. So we're sort of upgrading our monetary policy in a way and removing it. So in the past, from when we actually launched with sort of the DAO model. So we had these upgradable contracts, and in addition to this whole system, you could change how this worked based on a vote. So you would need a 10% quorum of the token holders could push through an upgrade to the smart contract. And we liked that because it would allow us to sort of evolve over time. But since we've sort of seen how DAO voting has worked and everything like that, we've grown to see that upgradability is actually a really big risk. There's a lot of, in addition to just breaking the smart contracts on accident, like Compound did yesterday. There's other ways that you could break it on purpose too, to benefit one group or another. Because like we had the ability, specifically to enable monetary policy, namely changing how much we mint and to whom, as far as, you know, basically like a monetary policy for, do we want to have staking rewards? Do we want to have other pieces? And we said, let's just get rid of this risk factor. Let's just turn it into, we have a constant minting and then leave it and we can't change it. And that's what we're doing now. So.
Cool. Yeah, so well, so back to like monetary policy.
Sure.
Like, let me see. So I think the kind of mechanics of dispute resolution are pretty clear. So Tellor utilizes a governance-based monetary policy for managing circulating supply.
This was something we're getting rid of. This is a piece that's no longer going to be an issue, but I can talk about it really fast if you guys want to, but the way that we had these things called Tellor treasuries for a while, but basically you have a system where you have a bunch of tokens staked, you have some users who want it, but mainly you just have a bunch of floating supply. And if you wanted to manage this, to say like, how do we sort of take some TRB out of circulation, you know, in times that not all the TRB is being used. This has like vibes of like MMT to it, but we wanted to be able to sort of suck a lot of the TRB out of circulation, basically just so you could stabilize the price over the long term. So in bad times, like whenever not a whole lot of Tellor was being used in the system and the price was relatively low, you could basically incentivize people to stake these tokens and pull them out of circulation in order to up the price. And then in good times, whenever the demand for Tellor was really high, you would theoretically let more out of circulation. So we would have votes to initiate what were called Tellor treasuries, which were basically just, they were smart contracts that token holders would come and they would put tokens into and they would get a return. So similar to like a treasury.
Why were there more than one? You're using the plural like treasury contracts, so there was like more than one?
Yeah, we had multiple of them. So you would issue them. So it was like similar to like a treasury, like a US treasury. Like there, you know, you would issue it, say like
1 year, 5 year.
Yeah, so like it would be like we did quarter one, so it'd be like for 1 quarter, lock up your tokens and you get 2.5% in 3 months. Something like that.
And why did you do away with this?
Because it was a governance risk. Because theoretically you could mint a bajillion tokens.
Oh, okay. I was actually just gonna say that I was just on a call where people were redesigning their tokenomics and kind of talking about buybacks and locking tokens to sort of not manipulate but change the price. And I've never seen that work in crypto. Like, I don't know if you've seen any examples. Like, I've seen that so many times in white papers where people talk about buybacks. UMA is one that talks about like buybacks to control the price. And I'm like, I've never seen that work in crypto for whatever reason. Like, I feel like people just don't care. I don't know.
The problem is that people always get greedy. So, you know, like Synthetics has this as well. Synthetics was a great example. So, well, Synthetics was one of the first people. They had a really low token price. And then they said like, come place a whole bunch of, you know, you have to stake 500% of the value on these derivatives or whatever. And I'm probably getting the numbers wrong, but then it basically leads to a huge demand in your token and a bunch of people pile in the staking. And that's always what you see. You see every time anyone starts it is you pile in. The problem is though, it can only be used as a change mechanism. It can't make demand overall, because eventually these need to be released. And if they aren't, you know, and when they get released, your price is going to tank because there's no actual demand. So what ends up happening is they make you stake 500,000 tokens, and then they increase it to 600,000, and then increase it to 700,000, and they have to keep doing it, keep increasing it, and it becomes this sort of Ponzi death spiral. Whereas like if you were just using it, if there was also real demand that was fluctuating and you were adjusting the amount that needed to be staked based upon some demand, it's okay. But usually token holders suck at monetary policy, because like anytime you actually want to have a good staking protocol in there, it should be about stabilizing the price of your token, not just making it go up. Because if it's just about making it go up, then it's not a good system. And that's where we always, because usually like by the time any of these subjective votes come in to say, let's lower the price of our token now that it's doing really good, you never see those votes get passed or even proposed. So
Yeah. What was I gonna ask? So I feel like, right, I don't know if there's like anything like I missed with like the technological overview, but I have some like other kind of like high level questions.
sure,
I
I
feel
think,
like,
yeah. The other pieces I think might be interesting would be, I think this is a great way that Tellor works, and how we probably differ from some of the other people. The cool thing about Tellor though also is this system, you know, the next question I would usually ask people on the call would be like, how do you put it on another chain? And this is one that is really, really hard, and that we're still dealing with. But we actually just deploy the whole system over on another chain. So you bridge over the token, and then you just deploy this whole system over there. So
how many chains have you done this on?
Arbitrum, Polygon, obviously mainnet, we're on Optimism, we're on Harmony. We can kind of go on any EVM really fast, so like all the big ones.
So what happens to your token?
You have to bridge it over.
Oh, it's bridged. It's not like a native token to that chain or whatever.
No.
Okay.
We bridge them. You could also use, so like Algorand, we deployed on, we built the system on Algorand, and Algorand has no bridge. So we just use the Algo token as the staking token.
So you use existing bridges, like,
yeah,
okay,
for sure. Well, like Polygon, Arbitrum, Optimism, like those were easy ones because they have like nice bridges you can use. Like they're, you know, it's their validators, so it's not too much of a stretch. But what we tried to do in the system is we're trying to separate risk a lot. So like this, like you're a user and you want the Bitcoin price, and this is, let's say this is another user and they want the ETH price. And then there's another user over here that wants the BTC price as well. But this is on, let's say this is on Polygon. Whenever we think about who's going to attack the system, the way that we've set it up now once you get rid of any sort of governance, there's actually, it's really, really hard to break the system as a whole, because you would, most of the time people don't want to break the system as a whole. They're going to go after a specific piece. So let's say they have a derivatives contract that settles to this, and they're trying to break your Bitcoin price. If they're trying to break your Bitcoin price, what they would have to do is they could either censor the whole thing. So if they just disputed every single price that came through, they could censor your Bitcoin price and prevent you from getting an update, right? But the way that we set it up now is this guy who's getting the ETH price, he actually doesn't care. His price is still coming through just fine. This person over on Polygon who's getting the Bitcoin price, they also don't care. Their price is coming through just fine. So you can have attacks, but it sort of leaves the system as a whole alone. And then in the same way too, if you wanted to like really break it, let's say you were accumulating vote power, you know, you bought all the tokens and you've been reporting secretly good values for a year to buy it up, and you were going to vote through a bad value, you could theoretically break Polygon by buying up all those votes over on Polygon, but then on mainnet the votes are just fine still. So like it sort of separates out the risk, because we had this, because you have this problem where you know, since we are a completely distributed system, we actually can't control who uses us. And you could make a system where, let's say there was an Oracle, let's say it was a simple like derivatives contract like we were trying to build, where whoever can predict the price of Bitcoin given to us by Tellor tomorrow gets $5 billion. You know, you could theoretically write that contract. And if somebody wrote that contract, we would be toast. You know, like for $5 billion, you could easily just like trash our whole system because you could buy up every single one of our tokens multiple times over. Just contact us for OTC deals. But you know what I mean? So it wouldn't be, it would almost be like irresponsible of that user to do that. But we want to try and minimize the casualties, I guess, to the other report, to the other price feeds who, and that's kind of how we're trying to think about it. Like, you can't control if somebody builds something really insecure on you, but how do you make sure that the other query IDs or the other chains and everything are affected as little as humanly possible? So yeah.
Apologies if there's some noise in the background. So do most of your validators, do you guys, like, I'm guessing they report to every chain, like, do they just update their software and then it's not a lot of trouble on their side? Like, what does that look like on the they're not validators, they're reporters, right?
Reporters. Yeah, so they would just, I mean, we have a software that we write, some of them use it, some of them have written their own to be more competitive. But yeah, you need to enter in a valid like node URL, so like an Infura key, and then a valid you know, whichever, and then wherever you're reporting to. Usually we have hard coded in the contract addresses, but if you wanted to like add new ones, you could. So like we've even had some chains, like I think like the Fuse network, like they asked us, they're like, hey, can we deploy Tellor on our chain? And we're like, go for it. And then they deployed the whole system and updated, you know, so like we can't control what chains people are putting us on either.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, like, how do you get reporters on new chains? But I'm guessing most of these guys just update their software and keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, most of the time it's the same reporters, but a lot of times it's you know, so that there's nothing to say like, you know, if you're Sasha over here requesting the Bitcoin price, there's nothing to say that you don't even have to tip it. You could just be the reporter and report it on your own. You know, it's still decentralized in the way that anybody can dispute it and see it.
Okay.
So it's a lot better than that. But yeah, usually, and sometimes there's separate communities. Like, you know, we have we're actually we're on the Pulse Chain testnet. I don't know if you know Pulse Chain.
I was just gonna say I've never heard of Pulse. Apologies to Pulse.
No, it's so you know Hex. It's the Hex community.
Oh, I didn't know. I mean, I know what Hex is.
They're doing like an Ethereum fork, and they're launching Tellor over there. And,
okay, cool.
And they're running our reporter on their own with their people. So
cool. I might buy some Hex then.
This is not financial advice.
Okay. So another question, like a little bit off topic, but this is like the big question when it comes to Oracle security. Like, and this is always the classic example. Like, there's some derivative contracts that has a payout of like $1 million. Like, how do you make sure that the Oracle is incentivized not to hack? You see what I mean? I don't know if I phrased that well for the audience, but if you can, how do you prevent the value of lying being higher than the value of speaking the truth in the system?
Oh, I mean, this was one of those things, like, I don't know if you can, you know, ultimately, like, you can't, kind of like back to my example, like if somebody wrote a contract that said like, you make $5 billion if you break Tellor, like you can't ensure that your always is going to be higher than that.
But theoretically, it should be the market cap, right? Like if we go to a dispute that gets to the highest level.
Well, right, it should be, well, it would be the cost to get 51% of this.
Yeah. So that's kind of a very loose upper bound.
It's very loose, yeah. So like you would want to like corrupt the team or corrupt, you know, like report for 6 months honestly, and there's something like that. And yeah, it would be 51% of this would be sort of the cost to, but this is like the cost, because you would need to break a dispute, but it would also be, the way that Teller works, like kind of like this was differently. It basically just comes down to who has the most money in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So
It's also, let's go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so it's like which user set, because the Bitcoin price, so you put a bad Bitcoin price on because you want the $1 million, it gets pulled off to a dispute, somebody else puts another one, gets pulled off, goes to a dispute, you put a bad one, and then it comes down to, well, who's gonna win? Who's gonna put on a bad value or a good value, and then which side's not gonna have enough money to dispute the other side? So it basically, similar like all things in crypto, it comes down to which side of the argument has the most money. And
that's one reason I like your that's a good example of why the representational setup is good, because it isn't as easy as grabbing 51%. Like you kind of have to
take your time.
You have to LARP as each of those categories for a little while before you can actually gather up the money.
Well, and you have to LARP as them and the interest. So let's say there was somebody who came on and they started reporting, just to gain this reporter share. There's nothing to say that, like, if we monitored that and said like, oh, this is what they're doing, good guys could do that as well. Good guys could LARP as good guys and submit more often to gain more voter share. And once again, it would just come down to like, who's willing to waste more money. But it's not as straightforward as like, I just got to go buy a whole bunch of tokens.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So I have a couple of, again, unless I'm missing some big piece, I have a couple of like random questions.
Please.
So in terms of like your system, like all of these systems that are like relatively complicated, and I mean like anything more complicated than something like Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's a lot of like parameters that need to be tuned. So your system has like fees, minimum stake and stuff like that. Like, have you had any interesting examples of when you realized that something needed to be tuned? Or you kind of gave the example before of like when you realized that like there has to be the option of response being invalid.
So other ones, I mean, we had originally our stake amount set at 1,000 tokens. And that was hard coded in. And this was like back before we had a token price. And then our token price quickly went to like 8. And then once it hit like 20 for the first time, we're like, guys, 1,000 is way too high. We were hoping that it would stay around, like $2,000. We didn't want it to be $100,000 stake, and so we had to tweak that. Another thing in our system too, like we had to change, like Teller was originally a proof of work system. So in addition to the submission, you also had to solve a nonce and a challenge. We quickly realized that proof of work, it got centralized so fast. Like,
really, that was the issue?
It was impossible to distribute. Yeah, because like you had originally, like, so I built a CPU miner and then we built a GPU miner. So in like August, I just had the CPU miner. The GPU miner came out in November. We had the first pool in December for GPU miners. And then by the end of December, January, it was nothing but FPGA pools in China. And it was like you could go online and buy these Teller FPGA miners for 20 grand a piece. And we're like, we had a market cap of like $10 million at the time, and people were spending 20 grand on FPGA miners for Teller. It was absurd. And then like the hash rate, like you could never compete on a home computer anymore. And so we were like, well, that ended quickly.
Do you remember what algorithm you were using for proof of work?
We made up our own. We had it was the ones that were available in Solidity. So it was Keccak, so it was SHA-256, SHA-3, and then RIPE MD160. So it was like those 3 in a row. And it was completely unique to Teller, which is why people were building Teller specific FPGAs on it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, I know, like this is why you hire cryptographers, because I think like one of the things they try to do is make it so that it can't be, it's like GPU hard or something. I'm like talking out my ass right now, but I know some things, some things you can't build specific ASICs for, like there's certain algorithms. But yeah, that's interesting, because I thought you came to the conclusion that dispute resolution was like sufficient for security. I didn't realize that there was like a centralization issue there.
No, yeah, I mean, it worked. Other than that, it was cool. It was a good community though. It was definitely good for passing out initial rewards, because for the first 6 months it was relatively good. And then I mean, like our community or our earliest token holders were all these old hardcore GPU miners from the old proof of work days. So we had a nice, yeah.
Huh, interesting. That was one of my questions. Oh yeah, how are new query, I should have asked this before, but like how are new query formats registered? Like if I want to know the color of a shirt that a president is going to wear tomorrow, like how do I register that query as something that people can report?
Yeah, so right now we have a GitHub that you can request in, so you store these pieces, but you can ask it sort of arbitrary questions too. So we have a GitHub to store like the standard formats, but the way that it works is you have a query ID and then you also submit what's called the query data. So the query ID is the hash of the query data. So the query data would be like, it's the bytes of like the first
string.
Yeah, it's a string. So like the first
Oh.
thing we have is like a type, which would be like spot price, or you could just have like we have like API, and then you type in the various responses, or
like in literally like in English.
yeah.
Oh.
So various inputs to each of the questions, and
Okay.
and then you can submit it. Yeah. So like for fun, we like looped through and we did it on like Mumbai over on the testnet, but we're like, let's submit prices for all 16,000, CoinGecko supported prices. And we did it in a day. And it was like, just to show we could.
Oh, and for the Moon Boys in the audience, if there are any, like how much money, if I wanted to be like a telereporter on like a 24-hour running laptop, how much would I expect to make in a month?
Probably none.
Really? That's how infrequent they are?
No, that's not at all, but it's competitive. So, like if there's this tip, you guys are all racing.
Oh.
So like you have to build good software to compete. So like that's why we were saying like all of them have like these MEV bots written, and like we have templates for writing these for like reporting and stuff, but on certain query IDs, like there are some queries that are less frequent and you can do it and report, but on the big ones, especially going after the time-based rewards.
So when you say like MEV, are people actually like restructuring like queries and their responses in a block to get them sooner?
Yeah, so if you submit and I submit in the same block, they're submitting via flashbots. And
oh, okay. Well, that's a good thing.
It is.
I didn't realize like how intense. I mean, no offense, but I didn't realize that teller reporters were very intense and they have their systems hyper optimized.
Yeah.
How many are there? Do you know approximately how many of these guys there are?
I think there's like 100 staked addresses, 100 something. How many actual individuals? I don't know. But it's a power reward like the rest. So I would say like the top 10 guys are, 75% of the system.
And how much do you think like they're making on average a month?
I think the total rewards in the system is something like right now it's something like 50 grand a month. So
okay.
So they're making decent money. So,
oh wow. Okay.
So
do any of them, it's a random question, but are any of them in the Discord? Like some of these people?
Yeah, for sure. Some of them we know a lot of them. and they try and make their faces known. So it's,
Okay. That's cool. So you got like I'll need to hang out there in the Tellor Discord.
yeah.
I want to know what kind of character this project attracts. Because you know every project has their characters, that certain type of person they attract.
Well, we had, there was like, well, it's interesting just how the reporters have changed over time. Now it's like you have some people in like staking pools or who compete at like yield farming. And that's like more of the crowd you get now. But earlier it was like the proof of work crowd. And then you had in there like, some of the bigger mining pools who were buying up FPGAs. So it's definitely changed over time. And but now it's like sort of stabilized. But now it's starting to get interesting as we go to more chains and see where people like to go. So
yeah. And another question, I think this is my last one, because most of the ones that are covered as far as I can tell. I know you and I kind of shared some comments about DAOs in general. Like, I'm not a big fan. And I think if I remember correctly, like the Tellor DAO had a lot more power initially, and now it's been kind of reduced over time.
yeah, that's like what we're doing with the upgrade. We're getting rid of the DAO completely. So there's going to be no more upgradability in the contracts, where just the only thing you can do is vote on disputes. That's that's the DAO's job now. And then, and the reason, it's just too much of a security risk and chance to mess things up. So this was, like I've talked about this before, but we want to make, like, whenever we were originally designing the Oracle, you saw things like, an example of a contract with like no upgradability would be like a Uniswap for the users. You deploy it and then people can read your smart contract, and if you deploy V3 from V2 to V3, the users have to drain the liquidity and go put it in the V3 contract. And this is great for the users of V2 and V3 because that it's not going to change the logic or you get rugged or introduce a bug. The bad thing for oracles though is, like, if you were using V2 as an oracle, you either have to go provide all the liquidity, which is crazy expensive, or you have to switch your address, which means that you have to have governance in your system. So originally we were like, well, let's us own that governance. So the user doesn't have to. Which was good, but I think the way that we're thinking about it now is that's still too much of a risk. The way that we would do it now is you could just redeploy the Tellor Oracle system. But it's a lot better than Uniswap in the sense that this contract still functions. So like, if you're still tipping it, reporters can stay there and stay on it. You don't have to upgrade. It's sort of more of an opt-in piece, and that's what we think would be sort of more fair and a better system for people.
Your comment actually made me think of a new question that's sort of tangentially related, but what's Tellor's stand on the upcoming merge, and whether or not to support the inevitable forks of Ethereum?
Well, I mean, as you can tell, like, our system is relatively decentralized, so like it'll actually exist on both chains. And so, like, if the report,
that's a good point. It's just a matter of if validators are choosing to respond.
No, I mean, for us, like, I mean, as far as the team goes, like, I mean, we think the merge is going to go in the thing of proof of stake, but like, it's not like we have control. It's not like there's some centralized piece in this system that breaks if we don't support it as a team. Like, it works just fine. So if we tell the reporters, like, hey, if you guys want to go report on both chains and have some fun with it, by all means, go for it.
That really shows the difference between a decentralized system and a centralized system, because a lot of the discussion about the merge and which chain will be will succeed or whatever, it has to do with these like central stablecoin issuers and Oracle projects like Chainlink. Like they kind of ultimately decide if you want to use whichever chain is going to be usable is the one that these people are servicing. Yeah,
and for us it would be like, if we were the main Oracle for all these projects and they forked, like, the reporters can report on both of them. If there's if somebody's tipping something of value, go for it. Part of me.
And then just one final question, kind of a big one, but maybe not if you don't have the answers, but like, are there any like pending research questions? Are there any like big questions for like future upgrades or anything like that? Things that you guys are really thinking through?
No, I mean, not really. It's something about how I'm sure, as you know, so like Tellor, with along with a lot of projects, like how do you sort of incentivize usage more? How do you get people using you and get people to care about decentralization? And those are always open research. You know, how can you get people to want something that's decentralized and not, say, a chain link, or just sort of using their own Oracle? That's definitely an open question. I think the other piece too is, you know, like UMA is doing sort of a pivot as well. Over that, they opened up, they're starting to do more bridging as well.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, and then like in the same way, like this system works great for bridges as well. You know, how do you get bridges to switch over?
Yeah,
You know, bridges are worse than even chain link. They're just straight up multi-sigs.
yeah, yeah.
Vast majority of them. So, you know, how can we go after that market? How can you build sort of safe bridges, moving it across? And that's one of the big things that we want to work on and just focus. It's like, how can we go after the users that we actually want, and sort of be seen in the image of, like, you know, whenever you think decentralization, you think Tellor, and
Yeah,
be,
I do.
yeah, no, it's great. But yeah, so that would be cool. And then, yeah, you know, like we want it to be like the backbone of some really good decentralized apps, because I honestly see, like, you know, you see this Tornado Cash thing that came through a few weeks ago, and you know, like a system like Tellor can't be shut down, and that's like basically every other Oracle would probably be in trouble and could be shut down if Tornado Cash was using them, but Tellor wouldn't be able to be.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I ultimately think the projects that are going to be on Ethereum are going to be projects that need this kind of system. So yeah, that's more of the open research piece. And then, yeah, I don't know what else would be an open research piece. We're just coming up with new fun ways to use oracles, I guess. That's always
Yeah, because I mean, finding new ways to use oracles is essentially finding new ways to use the blockchain.
yeah.
Because it's like every new application is basically enabled by some sort of new data.
Yeah, and people really like, you know, like with Tellor, like, you know, you can ask it any question right now, and we can put on, it's bytes data we put on, so we can theoretically put on everything, and every possibility is open to us. But people really like when you put specific examples on chain for them. So, you know, like once we put, you know, we did like the snapshot vote result. Like we put that on chain, and then people were like, oh, we didn't know you could do this. And it's like, yeah, you can do anything. We said that. But just you know, over time, that's going to be kind of our priority over the next year, just making sure, like, you show people how much you can do, you try and give them good examples and good, just
Yeah.
cut and paste the code.
Yeah, I hate to mention it, but I sometimes wonder if, like, because like I'm kind of explicit about this. I really like your project and I really like your guys' mentality, and it's clear that decentralization is actually important to you guys, but you guys get overshadowed by complete like VC cash grabs and stuff like that. So I'm like, I wonder if we just need to play dirty, just like pay a bunch
Goes
of
through them
TikTok
like,
shills.
hey,
Yeah, literally just pay a bunch of TikTok shills to talk about Tellor. Like, I wonder if we just got to play dirty, play the game.
yeah, we tried. I mean, that's been like our focus on kind of marketing from the get-go. We always tried that. Like the one thing we always did super early on is, you know, no partnership announcements. Like we like, because you know, we came about in like the 2018 era, and it was like, back then it was like every other day was like a Medium article of 10 partnership announcements for a chain link or for one of these
I
projects.
hate those.
They're all meaningless. Like, you know, because like none of the, like it would be like, we're just thinking about building together, and we might use their Oracle.
Yeah, a lot of those, pretty much all of those, as someone that worked on a crypto project before, like pretty much all those partnership announcements are made before any technical great integration has even occurred. Yeah. It's literally after a phone call. We've made a phone call. We're thinking about working together.
So we wanted, like, how can we make our education, you know, how can we make our marketing be educating people? How can we make it be, you know, this is actually how it works. You should use this because it's good. It's decentralized, not shilly price go up type talk. So, you know, we'll see. It's I don't know if you've seen the latest rumor, like our price went down a lot yesterday, and it was
Oh,
the apparent rumor was that our CEO Brenda was put in prison by the SEC.
where did you see that?
We had, I don't know, but we had people messaging us like, are you guys okay? Like, what's going on? And like, it was like completely false, obviously. Like, she was in yesterday. But it's just, it's a funny space. So
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. I wonder if that's a bit of bad luck, because I remember when we were at the Oracle conference, you're like, we're so tame. We need a bit of controversy for people
oh
to
yeah.
be interested in us. Remember when you said that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a bunch of good projects. I mean, that's the one thing I've realized in this doing this deep dive series too. Like, you know, like I loved the Reality ETH guy. If you watched him,
I still haven't. He had a pretty esoteric presentation at the Oracle conference. So I'm
but
gonna check out.
he's a super OG. He was building on Bitcoin before Ethereum, and
Oh,
he you know, and I was like, how do you make like, he has a system that has no token or anything, and I was like, well, how do you make money off? He's like, we don't make any money off this. And you know, and he's just like, yeah, like I'm just doing this for fun. Like it's him and like another person who live in Japan and they
cool.
do code. And I'm like, that's the spirit I love to hear. Like you're just
Nice.
you're building an oracle you believe in for nothing, and it's awesome. So yeah, I mean, like that's like, we obviously have some money in our system, but it's like, you know, there are people in this space still, and it's great to see, like, you know, people who just believe in the space and want to see some good projects
Yeah.
built. So
Yeah, I believe there's still a lot of those people. Or maybe I
for
just
sure,
have like I have a positive bias as well.
positive
So
bias. It's a good thing to have.
yeah. Okay, well, is there anything else I should touch on, or?
No, this was super great. Thank you so much for doing the deep dive with me.
Yeah, no, this was really fun.
Guest host Sasha. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have to have you back
Anytime.
on soon.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun.
All right. See you.
Bye, everyone. What are we at? That was about an hour.